was actually really amazing to sit so close to him because he's such a good speaker. His style is really interesting. He talks quite quietly, but he doesn't say anything that he doesn't really feel.
It's a great experience. I loved having him over and actually listening to him speak in person. It's very nice. Yeah.
And I particularly liked what he said about seeing people through a certain lens and having a vision of people as equal. And I think that's very relevant to contemporary discussion.
Especially the stories he told, they definitely reflect on the principles that he was trying to convey across.
I felt very calm throughout the entire talk.
I thought it was really good just to take a step back and really feel that there is a higher purpose in life, and to try and again just take away all the material things we have and just value the people that we have right now.
You feel like even though you may be overwhelmed with the world's problems, if you try to make a difference, you can make a difference.
So the title of today's talk is Influence Without Affluence, and I'm sure you already know quite a lot about Radhanath Swami, but he's a globally renowned author, speaker and philanthropist. He's had an incredible journey himself. His autobiography, there are actually copies of it just outside the hallway. So without any further ado, please can we have a warm round of applause for His Holiness Radhanath Swami.
ज्ञानतिमिरन्दस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनाशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मीलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। नमो ॐ विष्णुपदाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्त स्वामिनिधि नामिने। नमस्ते सरस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेषा शून्यवादी पाश्चात्यदेशधारिणे। हे कृष्णा करुणा सिंधु दीनबंधु जगत्पते गोपेशा गोपिका कांत राधा कांत नमोस्तुते। तप्त कंचन गौरांगी राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवे प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये। श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासदि गौर भक्तवृंद। हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे। It is my great honor, fortune, and pleasure to be with all of you at this very esteemed venue of the Cambridge Union. Thank you very much for coming this evening. I was asked to speak on the subject of influence without affluence. Here at Cambridge University, for centuries. It is a place that has significantly influenced the whole world. From a spiritual perspective, to be entrusted with power, the power of affluence, wealth, knowledge, strength, fame, skills, comes a great responsibility. A responsibility that is beyond just ourselves. Because at every moment, the choices that we make through our thoughts, our words, and our actions, we will influence the whole world. There is a saying that you can tell how rich you are by counting how many things you have that money cannot buy. Not long ago, I spoke this phrase at the House of Lords in London, and I received an applause. Everyone who was in the audience were people of great power and affluence. And it struck a chord within their hearts because they know that the real wealth of life is something beyond money, fame, skills, knowledge, and power. What is real wealth? It is said that in an evolved human society, people love people and use things. But unfortunately, so much in this world, people love things and use people to get them and to keep them. Unfortunately, there can be no inner satisfaction in our life in such a state of consciousness. I was recently told of one very influential doctor in America. Regularly, he would get his newspaper from a little boy whose leg was crippled. This doctor felt a certain compassion for him and decided he can't afford it, but I will arrange a surgery. So he went to a local medical hospital and told them, if you give me the facilities for free, I will teach how to do the surgery to all your medical students. So it was all arranged. And he went and told the little boy, I will fix your leg so that you could run and play with all the other children. And the little boy looked up at him and said, this is a really good thing, because if you teach other people how to do this for free, then so many other people like me will also benefit. So the day of the surgery came, and they were in the theater for the operation. The doctor and all the staff were together, and the students, they were behind glass with closed-circuit TV watching everything. Then the little boy was wheeled in. And the doctor told all the students exactly what he was about to do. Then he said to the little boy, I will fix your leg. And the little boy looked up at him. He was scared. He was nervous. Just before he went into his sleep from anesthesia, the boy said, "Doctor, I think that you're a really wonderful person, and I pray that God will bless you for your kindness to me." The boy went to sleep. After the successful surgery, the doctor told all the students what he had done, and then he said, with tears in his eyes, he said, "Over the years, I have done surgeries for super VIPs, multimillionaires, billionaires. I have made great fortunes from my surgeries." With great emotion, he then said, "But I can tell you, I never experienced so much meaning, fulfillment, and happiness as when I heard the words of appreciation of this little child." Where does this nature that we have come from? There was an American philosopher named William James. He wrote that the deepest principle of human nature is the craving to be appreciated. But an even greater fulfillment than being appreciated is actually to have the power to appreciate. The Bhagavad Gita gives us a glimpse into the origin of this natural human propensity. Everyone, our deepest instinct is to feel loved and to love. The Bhagavad Gita tells that true intelligence is to discover the happiness that is within ourselves, the joy and the satisfaction that is within ourselves. And when we find that, then with whatever we know, as far as knowledge or skills, whatever affluence we may have, it is utilized as an expression of that inner satisfaction and love that is within us. In the Bible, the same principle is spoken. What profiteth a person if they gain the whole world but lose their eternal soul? The Bhagavad Gita explains what true knowledge is. Vidyavanaya sampane brahmani kabihastini suni chaiva swapakecha pandita samadarshana. One who sees every living being with equal vision. This is knowledge. Whether one is black or white or red or yellow or brown, male or female, high caste, low caste, rich, poor, from one nation or another, from one religion or another, or no religion at all. Whether one is a human or an elephant or a cow or a dog or a cat, wherever there's life, there is a sacred part of God. This is a universal principle. If we understand our own nature beyond the ever-changing circumstances that we live in, including childhood, youth, old age, and death, when we understand that the living force, the true me and you, is eternal, then we can actually recognize how every living being really is our brothers and our sisters. And from this platform, we really care. We can really appreciate when love is awakened within our heart, which is our true wealth, our true nature, and nothing can ever take it away from us. It is only by our own will that we forget it, due to endless distractions, groping and striving to find the satisfaction that is within us outside of us. But when we find it within, then we can build our whole life on the foundation of that inner fulfillment. The foundation of a building holds up everything. A building without a strong foundation, however elegant it may appear to us, if there's a storm, it will crumble. And similarly, a life where we just build on the basis of material knowledge, material wealth, material fame, material skills, without that spiritual foundation of inner fulfillment, of grace, then when things don't go our way, our fulfillment and even our values and our integrity crumbles. Life is like a rainbow, a multicolored, multi-splendored thing, in which the joy of sunshine and the tears of rainfall are reflected equally. When we see the whole picture of the sky with the rainbow, we can appreciate it. Similarly, the real joy of life is not simply when everything goes our way. Because things will, no matter what we do, no matter what we gain, things will not always go our way. The only constant thing in this entire creation is change. Everything's changing. Our bodies are changing. Our loved ones' bodies are changing. There's birth and there's death. There's victory and there's defeat, success, failure, happiness, distress, pleasure, pain, honor, dishonor, health, disease. We cannot change the nature of our environment, but we can change our consciousness. We can find that foundation within ourselves and then build everything in our life on that foundation. A foundation of compassion rather than envy, arrogance, and greed. And when we have that compassion within our hearts, it becomes the most powerful motivating force to excel in whatever we do because we have a higher purpose. I remember years ago, George Harrison of the Beatles came to my guru, Srila Prabhupada. And this was when he was in the Beatles, and they were at the peak of their popularity. He said, I would like to give all this up and join the ashram and become like a monk. And my guru said, you have such affluence. You have wealth, you have fame, you have incredible musical skills. True detachment is not giving up these things. It's using them for the well-being of others. Try to use your great influences to bring a higher joy, a spiritual connection, and a deeper meaning to the people of the world. And he did that. And he actually influenced millions and millions of people to explore higher principles of joy and reality. In the book I wrote, The Journey Home, I tell one story. It was in the middle of the summer in India. In the summer in India is extremely hot. I was at Prayag, the place where the rivers Ganges, Yamuna, and Saraswati meet. And every year, every 12 years, the Kumbh Mela is celebrated at that place, which is perhaps the largest gathering of humans anywhere in the world. But when I was there in the summertime, there was no one. It was just myself. And I was sitting on the bank of the river. The only other person I could find was a hawk. He was flying in circles, coming lower and lower and lower until he was just a few meters above my head. And he looked really hungry. And I looked around and I was the only thing that looked edible anywhere. I looked up at him and his claws, really sharp claws, were flexing in and out. And his curved beak was very pointed at the end. His wings were brown and yellow and white. He was soaring lower and lower and lower. His eyes, they were yellow. They were just gazing, almost without blinking, at something. Suddenly, the hawk headlong dove into the water. This was the river Ganges. And went underwater. There was a skirmish. A few seconds later, he emerged from the water with a little fish in his claws. The fish was about a foot long. And this was all happening to me just about 1.5 meters in front of me. I was on the riverbank. And I could actually see the eyes of that little fish. I don't know if it was a boy or girl because I'm not expert at that science. But that little fish looked totally bewildered. I was thinking, he was probably just going about his life just like any other day. Swimming upstream, downstream, across stream, with family, with friends, playing, looking for food. And at the least expected moment, this hawk ripped that little fish out of its comfort zone. And the hawk went higher and higher and flew with the fish into a forest nearby. And I was thinking, what am I supposed to learn from this scene? And then I thought, perhaps we are all like that little fish, going about our life, doing our work, doing our studies, having our entertainment, dealing with our complexities, our joys, our sorrows. But we don't know what the next moment will bring. The hawk of fate could actually change everything. We see it on the news, we read about it in the newspapers, we know people who it's happened to, and it's even happened to us. to some extent. What really is important in life, because everything is always changing. We shouldn't be complacent to our true needs. Martin Luther King said, "If you do not have an ideal you're willing to die for, you have nothing really very meaningful or fulfilling to live for." That is something we have to find within ourselves and share that with the world to have real value. I was thinking, if that fish was swimming deeper, the hawk could not reach it. And similarly, if our awareness finds that deeper place within ourself, where that foundation of true fulfillment, true happiness, true love, true compassion is, then the ever-changing circumstances or the hawk of fate cannot really disturb us. The evolution of human consciousness is from going from the obsessive need to get things to the joy of giving. And this is a great motivating force. The more we know, the more we have, the more we could do, the more we could give. And it's a qualitative principle, not just a quantitative. Whether we have just a little or whether we have an enormous amount. It's the principle of integrity, value, and compassion that actually makes our life meaningful and actually has a tremendous influence in the world. Mahatma Gandhi said, "Be the change you want to see in the world." And what was his life? He was just a little skinny man. He just wore some little cloth, had little sandals, and that was it. And he didn't give material affluence to anyone. But what was his influence on the country of India and the world? His influence is he gave hope, faith, and a sense of determination to people. And Nobel Prize laureates like Nelson Mandela, Martin Luther King, they followed him. I heard of one lady. It was International Women's Day in India just a couple years ago. And one person who attended this event in Mumbai told me about the speech of a particular person. In the audience were politicians, entrepreneurs, industrialists, business people, professors, doctors, lawyers. And she was the keynote speaker. She was just wearing a simple little sari. She's about 63 years old at the time. Her name was Sindhu Tai. She told the story of her life. As she was speaking, everyone was weeping. In brief summary, she was born in a poverty-stricken village in Maharashtra, India. She never really had any education. When she was a little girl and wanted to go to school, her family made her take care of the buffaloes. When she was 8 years old, she was married. I think actually she was 9 years old. She was married to a man who was about 30. By the time she was 19, she had 3 sons, and she was pregnant. A mafia type of person who was exploiting the people of the village was especially forcing the women of the village to work really hard and paying them practically nothing. And everyone was afraid. But Sindhutai told the local collector, who was overseeing the police, and that person was stopped from what he was doing. But he was so angry. He went and told Sindhutai's husband a lie. He said, "You are such a fool. Your wife is having affairs with so many men. In fact, the child that is within her womb is my child, not yours. I've been having sex with her. If you don't kill the child and kill her, I will kill you." So the husband, the girl's 19 years old, he kicked her in the chest, not in the chest, in the stomach, repeatedly to kill her and the child. She laid unconscious. He thought she was dead. So he dragged her to a cow shed where a whole herd of cows are being kept, thinking that people will feel that the cows just trampled her and that's how she died. So she laid there unconscious. And when she woke up, she said, she found one cow standing right above her, protecting her. There were all these buffaloes and oxen and cows walking, and they would have certainly trampled her. But this cow was keeping everything away from her. And even when the in-laws came to make sure she was dead, the cow chased them away with their horns and stood over her. She came to consciousness and gave birth to a baby girl under the cow. And she said she took a rock and cut her umbilical cord. Took about 20 slices to get free from it. And for hours and hours, the cow protected. And Sindhutai, when she got enough strength, she embraced the cow and promised, "As you protected me when I was in great need, I will protect others who are in need." It's a long story, but no one would have her back. Her own family rejected her, her biological family, because according to their tradition, once you're married, you could never come back home. A foolish tradition, as many are these days. In order to not be exploited, she was sleeping in a crematorium with her little baby child. And she would collect wheat that people would put around the dead bodies, and she'd mix it with water and cook it on the fires of the dead corpses. It became such a depressing life for her. She decided, I don't want my child to live like this. So she was going to commit suicide. She went to a railway track with her child in her arms and laid waiting for the train to crush them. But as she was laying there, she heard someone crying in anguish. So she got up and she found an old man who was crying out. He was crippled. He was very, very invalid. He was crying for some food and water, so she went and begged and got him food and water. And she was thinking that old man was the voice of God. She called Krishna. She said, was telling me that I had a higher purpose in life than to commit suicide. I have something to do, something to contribute to this world. But then later in the day, she was sitting in a field wondering, what am I going to do? I have nothing. I have no one. How can I help anyone? She was under a tree, and she saw that there was a branch of the tree that a woodsman with an axe had violently cut. The branch was just hanging by a single string. But that branch was giving her and her child shade. So she was thinking, this is the answer. However much I have been beaten down, still I could do something for others. So she started going and finding homeless, abandoned, orphan children. And she became their mother, taking care of them. Somehow or other, she learned how to sing really nice, and she begged with her singing, and she provided for them, and somehow or other kept them safe. And after some time, people saw what a difference she was making to so many people that they built an orphanage for her. Over the years, she said, she's had about 1,500 children, over 1,000 grandchildren. And she's made a tremendous difference in her life. All of her children have a great education. Many are doctors and lawyers and farmers, something she never had. She's won so many awards internationally for her accomplishments. But then she explained what the most meaningful and fulfilling thing she ever did in life. Years and years later, after the president of India gave her awards and governors of states and international awards, this really old man came to her orphanage. He was starving, he was sick, he was homeless. He was asking for shelter. After a few minutes, she recognized this was her ex-husband, the person who tried to murder her maliciously. She said to him, when you left me to die, I was homeless in rags. Now you're homeless in rags, and I have a nice place with so many people. She said the most meaningful thing in her life is she forgave him. And she said, I will give you shelter, but I'm not your wife. I'm your mother. And when people would visit the orphanage, she would introduce him. This is my eldest son, and sometimes he's very naughty. She told a story. It moved me. So at one place, I shared this story, and somehow it was on YouTube. And in her orphanage, someone showed it to her. So she wanted to meet me. So in Pune, I met her. And she was with a couple other people. And we spoke for about an hour together. It was a wonderful conversation. And afterward, there was one lady who was sitting next to her, who was just beaming with smiles the whole time, but didn't say much of anything. And when I was just about to leave, Sindhutai said, "I want to introduce you to this girl. She's the one who was born under the cow. She's now a medical doctor, and she's taking charge of one of our orphanages." And then she said to me, "I consider all of the tragedies in my life to have been gifts to empower me to make a difference to others." She considered it all the grace of God. She said, "My life has been a road with many thorns, but I made friends with those thorns, and my life became beautiful, and I could give beauty to so many other people's lives." That's one little example of influence without affluence. In my own life, there was a person, Srila Prabhupada, who's my spiritual teacher. He was living in a simple holy place in India called Vrindavan. It was such a beautiful place where people go to retire, to live their life with holy people. But he had this burning compassion to share this universal message of bhakti or devotion with the world. So when he was 70 years old, he was on a cargo ship, the Jaladuta, that sailed from Calcutta to New York. He only had $7. He didn't know a single person outside of India. On the ship, he had several heart attacks. When he came to New York, he lived in the ghetto of the Bowery in Manhattan. He was robbed, he was threatened, he was abused. He had nothing and no one. But he wanted to share what he found within himself. His love for God, who we call Krishna. He explained that this love that is within us is a universal principle, the essence of all great spiritual paths. Within a couple years, he had tens and thousands of followers. This was in the 1960s and 70s when there was a counterculture. For those of you who know about the counterculture, it was a very interesting time in America, where the younger generation, a large sector, was revolting against the values of the older generation. The Civil Rights Movement, the Vietnam War, many revolutions, many confusions, many confrontations. And there was a saying amongst us young people, never trust anyone above 30. That was like a mantra for the counterculture. Here was Prabhupada, he was 70. And the people that came to join him, oftentimes they were people from middle class, upper middle class, and very wealthy families. They had no shortage of material things, but they saw so much superficiality and dissatisfaction among people who had all these things. They were looking for something more and wanted to make a difference in the world. He had nothing materially to give us, but he gave us what we consider to be the most valuable thing that we just wanted to share. And a couple years later, Srila Prabhupada was in Mumbai, and he was speaking to some very, very affluent industrialists and business people. He said, when I went to America, I had nothing. And now you see all these people, highly educated, from wealthy backgrounds. They're receiving this Sanatan Dharma, this universal spiritual culture. And they're doing everything they can to assist me. And these people he was speaking to, they understood the power of compassion is far greater than anything that money can do. But when money and knowledge and strength and skills are built on the foundation of that compassion, then not only is our own life enriched beyond our comprehension, but we could make such a difference. We can have such an influence in the world. Each and every one of us, whoever we are, because everyone is so inherently special. And nothing and no one can take that away from us, as long as we are aware. To be an instrument of compassion, an instrument of grace, is the true influence, beyond affluence. Thank you very much.
So now we have just 10 minutes to just take a few questions. Is that okay?
My pleasure, thank you. Yes?
Yeah, so if anyone, I will say mine, but if anyone, yeah, just ahead.
Swami Maharaj, you quoted Martin Luther King saying...
Can you speak a little louder?
Sorry, it's better? Can you hear me?
Yes.
You quoted Martin Luther King saying, if you don't have an ideal worth dying for, then you don't have much to live for. How does one go about finding this ideal that is worth dying for?
The true ideal is to love and to be loved, and to be an instrument of that love. Socially, economically, academically, so spiritually, in whatever arena our life may take us, to be an instrument of that. The ideal of integrity, dignity. We were saying the world is ever changing. If the foundation of our values is not very strong and internalized, then the storms of temptation, the storms of fear, the storms of doubt will cause our values to collapse. So when we build our ideals on these spiritual principles, which actually was the foundation of Martin Luther King, it was based on spiritual principles that he was fighting for the justice of his people. Real integrity is through the storms of life we maintain these ideals, because we understand its value. Unfortunately, the propaganda and influences that are very much permeating the world is to keep these inner values of spiritual integrity as a detail in life. It's about fame. It's about money. It's about the passion to fulfill physical and mental pleasures. And that's why there's so much exploitation, so much greed. The greatest shortage in this world is not money, it's compassion. That's the greatest ideal. And when we find that ideal, the Bible says to love God with all your heart, mind, and soul. And when you actually connect to that love, then the second part becomes natural, that we love our neighbor as ourselves, and everyone is our neighbor. Regardless of their color, their nationality, their religion, or their sex or species, everyone is our neighbor. When we understand our own spiritual nature. When you water the root of a tree, that water naturally flows to every part of the tree. When we connect to our own divine nature, and that love for God and feeling God's love for us, then naturally that love extends to every living being. In a dynamic way that activates us to really make a difference. To stand up against injustices, not with simple anger and vengeance, but with compassion and wisdom. We find these ideals by connecting with people who have these ideals and opening our hearts. Does that answer your question? Thank you.
I think we probably just got time for one more question. So, yeah, I'll pass just over to the person in the front row.
Swami Radhanath, I really enjoy your stories, and I do want to look up this woman you mentioned that gave a speech at the International Women's Day event in India. Could you please say her name?
Sindhutai Samkal.
Can you spell that? Or maybe say it slower at least.
Sindhutai-Samkal.
And I wanted to ask you, what response can you provide or help us orient around in terms of thinking about how we can respond to the world's environmental issues and crisis? What can we do spiritually? What do you advise?
The environment of the world is very much a reflection of the environment within human beings' hearts. The pollution of the rivers and the oceans and the air and the land and the sky is just an extension of the pollution within people's hearts. Greed, arrogance, insensitivity, an inability to see the whole picture of what life is. We just become obsessed with just one little piece, which is our own greed. That's what's polluting the world. If the concept of yoga means to be reunited with our true self and our nature. And interestingly, the Latin word religio, which is the root of the word religion, means to bind back or reconnect. So they really mean the same thing. Yoga means harmony, where the body, the mind is in harmony with our true self. And then we learn to live in harmony with God, with other living beings, and with nature. We're totally depending on nature at every moment. Therefore, in many traditions, we say Mother Nature, because nature is our mother. Like little tiny infant babies, we're completely depending on our mother for every breath we take of air, for water, for food, for clothes. Nature is supplying everything to us. And from the Bhagavad Gita's perspective, the Bhakti perspective, Mother Nature is the motherly aspect of the divine or God. She has extended into this world by supplying everything to us. And to feel compassion for nature, to live in harmony with nature, is inseparable to true spiritual life. To clean the ecology of the heart, then we could truly make a difference in cleaning the ecology of the world around us. Does that answer a question?
I'm afraid that's all we've got time for, but thanks so much for coming. Please, we have one last round of applause.